I used to go out and party and stand by. Boom, 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 but I was too nervous to really get down. As long as you're grooving, there's always a chance. Doom, 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 doom. That somebody watching, I'm almost done, is gonna make a romance. That was by a one Brother Marvin Gaye. And this is our confidence candle. Let's bring in our guests. They may not be here yet. Oh! Stephanie, join us.
Great song.
No,
Great
wasn't
song.
it? Do you
Yes.
want to know a fun fact about that?
Yeah, I do.
Hi. I'm going to tell a quick fun fact about Marvin Gaye. So, well, it's not really about him, but that song was ripped off by Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams, and it was called Blurred Lines, and it came out in like it was during Miley's fun era, and I remember a wonderful performance on the VMAs that was just mind-blowing. I think we all remember that, and so that song blew up and became popular, and people were like, wait a minute, isn't that Marvin Gaye's Gotta Give It Up? And so they were sued, and they got in trouble for that, for ripping off the song. So that's
how's the Marvin Gaye song go? I don't know how it goes. Can you sing it for me?
Well, I did, and I don't repeat. I don't repeat performances, Stephanie. Okay?
I was late to the party.
It was a good performance too. I was over here doing my.
No way.
Oh yeah.
He sings it in falsetto, and so it's not something that I can repeat. It's just in the moment.
That's fair. It happens in the moment. I get it.
But now you got something to go and listen to, and we're done.
Yeah.
So. Welcome.
How are you guys?
Thank you.
I know we have a guest. Can we talk about me?
Of course. Let's talk about Denise.
I want to talk about me. If that's
I want to talk about you.
I love talking about you, so I think that's fine.
I was going to ask, do you have a border collie now?
Can you see him? He's over there having his snack. Hold on.
He's a big
I'll get you a little closer.
Hold on. Yeah, he's like 9 months old, isn't he?
That's my baby.
Oh,
isn't he beautiful?
Hi. He's so beautiful.
He's gorgeous. He's gorgeous, and he's so good-natured and cute, and he's just truly a lovely, lovely dog.
I saw the video of them running around today. Out in the open together.
That's huge. Still a lot of work in the house to integrate, but I'm not having problems. It's just indoors is hard because the spaces are tight. And then the next step is I have 3 dogs, not 2. So I take like Burrito out in the yard with ice. That's okay. But 3 is just a thing, right? So you want to have everything smooth before you have all 3 together, because that can be just dangerous because they can't do proper interactions, body language, and all that, right? So I'm taking my time. And then today, Zen took his stuffy toy and went and laid on a dog bed next to the puppy. So that was nice. Yes, he went over there, and so I'm hoping that he's like, oh, he's my little adventure buddy. Like, he can keep up.
How did you pick this puppy? Like, how did he come into your home?
I've been looking for a long time because I have the ranch and I have animals, and it's really, I could use a dog. So I talked to a couple instructors at the school where the one I own. So Elaine and Barbara have border collies and such. And originally I was buying a puppy from Barbara, but then they did that 4-month import rule, and Barbara's in Canada. So I just, it's not reasonable to ask a breeder to hold a dog for 4 months, you know?
Yeah, that's a little weird.
That's, it would have been a nice puppy. But then they were giving me names, and I listened to this lady on a podcast, and she was talking about how she picks puppies, and I was like, oh my, I like this lady. Like, it's very much how I think about picking dogs. And she's not far away. She's in Nevada, and I'm California, so it's not that far. So I started talking to her about 6 months ago, And I was actually supposed to get a puppy from a litter that did not take place. And then I moved to a second bitch who had 11 puppies. And then they're like 4 weeks old now. And then she sent me a note. She goes, I have this 8-month-old. I don't know if you were 7 months at the time. I don't know if you'd be interested. And as we talked more, I didn't want an older puppy because I'm concerned about integration. It's a lot easier with an 8-week-old. But I already knew he would do the work, right? Because she sent me a video and she's like, he's not even trained and he just does the work,
Wow.
So I really wanted a dog that was going to work. And so she said, why don't you come up and look at him? She had 2 puppies, a 4-month-old and an 8-month-old. Come look at him. And I just really liked him. So there he is. But anyway, that's my excitement. Now I'm done talking about myself. I just thought we should just get that out of the way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would have just wormed it in there somewhere else. So
it truly was the elephant in the room.
Yeah. So
in the corner.
Sometimes you gotta ask for what you want, and then you can be like, "Hey, we have a guest. Let's talk about it."
I appreciate that. Honestly, I had plans. I was like, "What am I gonna ask the ladies?" And I was like, "I want to know about this puppy. Like, is it your puppy? What's the news?" So I'm happy about this.
Me too. I'm really excited to see all the, I've watched Zen literally every day of his life since he was a puppy, like some sort of weirdo. I'm just creeping in between the blinds.
I know him so well.
What are you guys doing? I know, like I have a parasocial relationship with Zen, Finzi.
I'm attached.
I think you're going to have a special relationship with this one too. He's super bright, super trainable. And I do different things just because I have different directions. Some stuff is all the same, of course, but it's fun to play tug with a different kind of dog. So anyway, it's coming from a different side, I'd like to bring out his inner border collie. So my husband just walked in the room and said, "Hi, puppy," and he peed. So I'd like to get past some of that. You know what I mean? Like, I'd like a little bit more hardness there. I'd rather you not pee every time.
I had a dog like that. I had a wonderful dog. Her name was Biggie because she's notorious. I had to say that. I'm sorry. And she would, when I first got her, I was working at my first job that I ever had. So I was about 19 years old and I was working at a vet clinic. And I would drop her off in daycare because we had a daycare every morning. And the lady that ran daycare would just stand there with a mop staring at me. Because every time, it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter if I took her aside. It didn't matter. She would walk in the first gate. She would just be like, and then she would pee. And the lady her name was Pat. I'll never forget her standing there just lovingly mopping my dog's urine every day.
Yep. Both of my girls are guilty of that too. I share my Chihuahua with another.
Uh-oh, you froze. Did she freeze? Oh, okay, it's buffering. It'll come back.
That was weird, though. We were doing so good.
Oh,
you froze on us.
There's a little freeze
okay,
again.
You're back.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yeah.
Share your Chihuahua. You left us hanging it. Who do you share your Chihuahua with? I want to know.
My therapist, who was my client. They got I'll explain. All right.
This
is
excellent.
We're just getting into it. So years ago, I got hired for a really, really wonderful client who got a Tibetan Terrier, and they wanted the dog to be in their home as a part of they have an in-home therapy practice. But then, we did the training, but we're like, your dog doesn't really give a shit. Like, wait, can we swear on this? Is that allowed?
I try to cap Denise because she gets a little.
I bet
with the.
Yeah.
I'm like, Denise, listen, we've got kids. Yeah.
It's just a safe space. Okay, great.
We're allowed 2 swear words, and we try our very best not to use the F word. I just made that rule up right now.
All right, I like it. I'll do my best.
Now you're down to 1. You've got 1 left.
Shit. So anyway,
you're great.
They had wonderful. You guys also. This wonderful Tibetan Terrier. Doesn't want to be a therapy dog, it's more of a cat. Time goes by. I have a Chihuahua at the same time who wants to live under your skin if you would let it. And then our dogs became best friends. One day I let them board my Chihuahua. She gravitated towards the work. I'm in Canada, and my Chihuahua gets super depressed in the wintertime. Not to say that loosely, it's very sad. So she gets to live her best life mostly in the winter months, being on people's laps all day as a therapy dog. And everyone's happy. So
Wait,
yes.
your dog
Sorry.
summers in the Hamptons?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, if we could
you
just
could say that's
your,
true. Yes.
your dog's a snowbird? No,
Well,
snowbirds go to the,
so she still lives in Canada, but they have a bigger
oh,
house
okay.
and they have
So she's not like a
carpets and they have a
Florida
dog.
gal.
No, I wish. I've really contemplated buying a house in Mexico and flying there. I have, like, I'm not exaggerating, but I didn't do it. So she gets to have like the next best option, which is
Wow.
their big house with carpets and her dog friend. Better than my house.
Hmm. So it's
Anyway,
That
like
sounds great.
almost,
I mean,
yeah, it's like
that's like
she's
the
got
perfect
step
life.
parents,
it's a
like two
Yeah,
win-win.
step-parents.
And
you
my
got
other
the
dog, yeah, my other dog wants to be like a single child, so she's also happy about
Hmm.
this. Yeah, we're all happy.
Hmm.
y'all get a little break too. I like that very much. All right,
Yeah.
Steph, what should I do about my dog peeing? Let's talk about it because it's I'm sure some of our listeners have this issue and want some help.
Yeah, so that is a great topic. And tell them who you are and why you care about dogs peeing in the house and how you.
Okay, we're going right in
Yeah,
for it. Where do I begin? Are we talking literally about the peeing or just more so about who I am?
both,
Okay,
all.
all right. Denise, I don't know, you're screwed, but for what I would do, essentially, I am a dog trainer. I mostly work with pet parents. That being said, I've recently got the title of a family dog mediator, if you guys are familiar with the legs course, and that feels
Yes.
so much better. Because, as I think you guys can relate, it's like dog training is like a sprinkle in the job, and most of it is more so just about like finding where everyone is having a bit of a mismatch. How is the dog struggling? How are the humans struggling? Meeting the humans' pain points, helping the humans understand the dogs, and then trying to find a place where everyone can be happy in between. And always asking myself, WTF, what's the function? And that's how we can work through, whatever questions they may have, such as why is my dog peeing?
Hmm.
That's it.
Function, to break that down for people really quick. I know when I started taking courses about the function of behavior, a lot of stuff changed for me because I already knew some of that stuff. I did not have the language to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that?
Yeah,
What's your experience with that before you knew what that word meant, and then you learned, and how are you
yeah,
applying it?
totally. I think it can mean a lot of things. I think it's important to consider like the dog's biology, right? Like what is natural to them given the circumstances that they've now found themselves in, and why are we seeing certain manifestations of behavior given these set circumstances? So we can oftentimes look at our dog's behavior and say, that's totally random or that's bad. Why is this happening? Without realizing that there's an underlying motivation or a misunderstanding or an adaptation that the dog is doing because, it's maybe are arbitrary rules. They found themselves inside of a home and they don't necessarily care whether or not they're peeing on your carpet or not, or they don't have a means of telling you that they want to go outside, or they're not capable of holding it. Like there could be so many things. So it's helpful to get it curious about why our dog is doing what they're doing instead of labeling it good, bad, how to fix it. It's, well, there could be so many reasons what might be the contributing factors to your dog's behavior. Yeah. What about you? What's your take on that? Because it could, again, mean so many things.
Well, in this particular case, a little background on the puppy. He's a very submissive puppy, quick to appeasement,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
a lot of appeasement behaviors. He never does it with me, only does it with, as far as I've seen so far, with men. So I think it's an involuntary pee.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a submission, appeasement behavior, and he just leaks. He's also
Mm-hmm.
excitable youngster. He likes to see the people. So I think there's the, oh, I'm so excited to see you. And I think maybe he had training before I got him to sit politely when he met people. And I think maybe that's an effort.
Mm-hmm.
So he's wiggling up, down, around center, peeing, sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And then my husband, like, so we're working on it. But so I told don't look at the puppy, but he kind of has a little bit of high squeaky voice, like puppy, 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 like a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so, whereas I don't even, unless somebody saw it, they think it's terrible. I don't even greet the puppy. Like, I walk over, I open the cage door, we walk outside, the puppy's leaping and bouncing. I'm not even paying any attention to the puppy for a minute or two. It's not even conscious. I just know. And then the puppy pees and runs around a little. I say, hey, baby, and come over. So I think, like, I don't approach at all and pet.
Good.
My husband approaches and pets. And then I think all that other stuff. So I really think it's more a matter of husband training and time, you know, as they get a little
Ooh.
older, a
Yeah.
little stronger.
Do you guys know this is like a really interesting fact about why it gets better with age? It's actually something, well, it's a couple things. I mean, it's all the things Denise was saying, but in their body, the hormones or the sphincters of the body are controlled by hormones. And so a lot of dogs will experience excited urination simply because they're, for lack of a better way to say this, that they are not mature yet and their hormones are not fully helping the sphincter do what a sphincter does, which is this. And we have
That's
many of them in
interesting.
our body. Yeah, we have a lot of them in our body. When dogs experience incontinence, it's typically because they have some lack in hormones. And so they will take substitutes like the DES chews, which are, you know, a form of estrogen. They'll take phenylpropanolamine, which people know as Proin, that will help with stuff like that, which is another reason why we encourage you to train your dog when you get a puppy, because you're helping that process along. When the dog has to learn to hold their bladder a little bit more, you're helping that sphincter become stronger and hold their pee in a little bit better. But I
I
always
did
thought
not
that
know
was
that.
really
That is
interesting.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes, I did it
Cool.
again. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, Denise is like, I didn't know that about dogs. And I'm like,
Whoa. Is there any correlation between that and aspects of the prefrontal cortex not being fully developed and the young dog struggling with gas and brakes and connecting the dots, or is that completely unrelated? Do you know?
oh, I think it would. I mean, I think that we could deduce that it's probably related. I
Right?
think any immaturity in the body is going to yield itself to impulsiveness, whether it's a sphincter or a thought process or whatever. I think that's a pretty general rule.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Very interesting.
I
Yeah,
did
it
have an old lady
is.
dog who was spayed around 8 years of age, and by the time she was 14, she was peeing so much in the house. Like, she would stand up from her dog bed, she peed all over her dog bed. She walked across the room, there was trail the whole way, and
Yeah.
it was okay. That was just like, okay, whatever, old dog, but it's worse. My terrier took that as an invitation to start peeing in the house, because since we now pee in the house, we'll all pee in the
We'll all
house,
pee in
right? It was
the
just
house.
terrible. So, but the drugs worked beautifully. I had her on both of the drugs you mentioned at different times,
Yeah,
and
cool.
really cleaned things up really well until the very end, at which point nobody cared anymore. We lived in a kennel. It was just, there's vomiting and diarrhea. It was a mess around this. We rolled up all the carpets and just said, you know,
You roll with it.
we just got to get through this last year, and then we'll
And
figure
then
it
we're
out.
getting new carpet.
But what's interesting is the day she died, he stopped peeing in the house. So clearly, you know, pee is pee.
Yeah.
I'm going to be most unhappy if he starts peeing in the house because the puppy.
I will be most unhappy.
I will be most unhappy and just displeased. So hopefully I will clean it up adequately on these little occasions that, you know, yeah, that would, that would not be a winner, especially if Zen started peeing in the house, because Zen's a big dog and he's a kind of a smelly pee dog, you know, boy dog,
Yeah.
intact. He's, yeah, that would not be good.
That's a
I'm
lot of pee.
dooming myself here.
Somebody said something up here a little bit ago about there is a piece about the way men versus women physically present to dogs. So if your husband came in and was silent, there, you know, because a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys don't talk to the puppy, and the dog will still do the same thing. Let's talk about that. I don't think we've ever talked about that on here. The physical presentation of when. So let's back it up just a little bit so we can give it a frame of reference. A lot of people will say, "My dog does not like men. My dog is scared of men, intolerant of men," however we want to say it. Do you think that's always true? Do you think men always present physically in a different way than women? Do you think some women can present physically like intimidating?
Mhm.
I mean, it could certainly, there could be a hormonal quality, but I
Oh,
actually think it's the
yeah.
presentation.
Mhm.
The way, because what's interesting is he's actually raising his voice. So it's almost squeaky. Now, I, the women I hang out with are dog trainers. And so
Yeah.
we behave differently. You know, we don't do that,
Mm-hmm.
or not in the same way. So like today he met several people and he just walked up to them and each one of them just reached out and like kind of mindlessly pet him. And that seems to work really well. You know, that sort of mindless, like
Auto
petting, but not really a
reflex.
lot of
Yeah.
contact. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? One lady got down on the ground and they were all over it, but it was on grass. So for all I know, he was peeing up, down, around center. I wouldn't even know. Most of my dog trainer friends are kind of low key about greeting other people's
Yeah.
dogs. And I have asked what I tell them is, look, if you're gonna greet them, why don't you do it outside? But as I'm thinking about it more, I wonder how much of it is the direct approach, the walking up.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
That's a trigger, and then reaching over, and
Mhm.
then all the things we already talked about.
And
But that's really
culturally,
interesting. I think some dogs, men have, they've had their moments, right? Because you got the men, the here boy, boy,
mm-hmm.
boy, that whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. And for some dogs, that's a little scary. And I could totally see dogs generalizing if you're in a place where that's how men interact with dogs.
Mhm.
Women tend to be a little softer about the matter. And, if you've got
Yeah.
a man who's kind of a little bit hard on the dog, don't jump on me. Because I have noticed, though, I'd love to hear, Steph, your opinion, but I have seen a difference between how dogs respond to men and women within a family, pet
Oh, me
dogs.
too. All
Oh
the
my
time.
God. Yeah. This is a
All
great
the time.
topic.
What
Mm-hmm.
is that about?
I think interaction can be a big part of it, but then you also see situations where people are not maybe playing the roles that you would anticipate they would to get that same reaction from the dog. And perhaps it is just the, the essence or the energy of the male figure. Okay, a little side thought, and this is maybe anecdotal, and I'm curious about your guys' perspective of this. Something that I've noticed, and don't know if it's correlation or what, I often find dogs that are in general more submissive gravitating towards women, and dogs that are generally more like robust and confident gravitating towards men. Don't know if that's anecdotal, don't know if there's anything behind that, but I see that prevalent so frequently. Any
Hmm.
thoughts on that?
I'd have to really think about that.
Yeah, so would I. I would have to like mentally try to go through
I
various.
I don't I one of the things I think when you say that, the first thing that pops up into my brain is that correlation may not be causation.
Exactly.
Because I think there's so many variables. I think
Hmm.
men might be more likely to get rid of a submissive dog.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, so
I
it can be
think
so many.
that might be true.
Oh, there's
Hmm.
plenty of men who aren't going to put up with the dog who pees on the floor when you
Right.
walk in. Like it's
Yeah.
it's
No.
not manly behavior.
Yeah.
Like you
Right.
can bite my guests, but you can't pee on their shoes.
Right.
Right?
That's exactly
So
what I meant.
true.
They'll put up with
Yeah.
different behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, I also notice that there is a really interesting dynamic between a man and a woman in a family where they're both participating in the training and where they're not both participating in the training and the
Hmm.
wife is just there.
Hmm.
There's sometimes I do get a lot of couples, and for the most part the couples that I have are both like participatory, but they it's almost like I feel like we're doing something in secret behind their back,
Mm.
like she's, do you remember on Sleeping with the Enemy when Julia Roberts was taking secret swim lessons so she could swim the I sometimes I feel like that's what we're doing. Like we're
Mm.
secretly training the dog behind his back and he like legit thinks that the dog is just magically getting better. You
Hmm.
know, it's taken some husbands till damn near till the end of training and they're like, huh, the dogs are better. Cool, I guess that lady did know what she was talking about.
I see that.
They need to see results more than they need to feel seen and heard.
Mm-hmm.
And the women tend to need to just feel the support, and then they can produce. They can go, they can do, they can whatever. But the men they need to see results, and then they will open up about more stuff, because now you have credibility. Now I see that, okay, lady, and I don't take any offense to that. I don't care if they're being chauvinistic. I don't care if they're being, I don't really care about what guys do. I just think it's the nature of them being men, and we do weird stuff too.
Oh, totally.
Women can be so ultra toxic that it blows my mind. So I just kind of, I don't take it personal anymore. And it used to really bother me.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was about my gender, my race, my age, I have thought it was about every single damn thing. And I don't think that it's anything personal. I think that it's just men operate in a different way. And the way that I craft my message is to get to people's hearts. And that may not be the way that you do that. So I use a lot of humor. You know, I gotta tell a lot of jokes. Anyway,
that would be high pressure though. Like if you were a young trainer, I don't mean chronological age, I mean newer trainer, there'd be a lot of pressure to have that. Whereas I'd be like, whatever, I can train your dog. I mean, I just stick around. So that wouldn't bother me, but it would have bothered me 30 years ago or whatever. Like that, the pressure of needing proof. I don't know if that's really the right word, but I understand what you're saying. And I see that. We do. I mean, women and men, we do often communicate differently. And my personal experience is that mixed groups always function better than all women or all men. All women groups get into their weird shit. There's my one. All men get into their weird silliness. And then a mixed, it could be 9 men and 1 woman, or 9 women and 1 man. And I find that something happens when you add the opposite sex that just takes the worst extremes off of our groups, you know. So I personally prefer a group with some mixed groups.
That's why balanced trainers tend to be they're a mixed bag. There's a lot of men, a lot of women, and I've noticed that more in the force free community, it's just women, and it will get out of control toxic real quick. And because what women do is that we start, it's something in our brain. It used to keep us alive, you know, when we're just out living in little villages, you know, we don't have, it's what we do is we start to, because we got a little, oh no, you're in my family. Oh no, you're in my group. Oh no, you're in my group, and I got to protect my group. I swear to God, if you do anything to my kids, you know, we get like that. And then we start to justify behaviors for the protection of the group, protection of the principles in the group. And we'll just, I mean, we'll start poisoning people, damn it. Like, it'll just get really super toxic, where men tend to go towards just war. You know, they're like, well, we'll settle this with this, you know, and we're just different ways of dealing with things. I went through a period of my life where I was,
I'm going to kill you, but it's not personal.
And then it's over.
It's not personal.
We're in a war.
And women are like, this is personal.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Women take everything personal. My boyfriend calls it woman brain. I'll say something to him, and I'll be going on, and he just is silent. And I'm like, why don't you say anything? And he's like, I am not going to respond to woman brain. And at first I was like, that's rude. You're chauvinistic. And he was like, no, you are spiraling into some tangent that doesn't have anything to do with anything. So I'm just not going to say anything. Like, that's what it is. And it has helped me. That's what you're referring to, Denise, is there's some sort of thing that happens. There's almost like a balancing in some way of some of the more extreme behaviors.
Yeah. And you put a bunch of men in a room and they just get so nasty. You got to throw a woman in there, you know, and it takes that kind of drinking nastiness off the table. They act like adults. So, yeah, but most of my clients, I would say 90% women when I was working with people. Very, very high percentage.
Yeah. I think it's still, what do you think, Stephanie? Is that what your percentages are?
Definitely. I would say quite the same. And also always interesting when it's a couple dynamic. Oftentimes it's fine, but although to what we're saying, which I agree, is oftentimes you throw the opposite sex in the group and it kind of balances things out. I also oftentimes have clients where there's like a perfect polarization of one another. Of no, the dog is fine. No, we have to keep the dog on a tight leash. Oh, the dog can have freedom. No, the dog is going to kill everybody. And just, it's amazing when we're working on training dogs, but then we also have this other dynamic in the job happening, which is like relationship dynamic. Couples probably perpetuating their own patterns into dog training as well.
1000%. Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. Yeah.
Jerri and I have talked about
so
this a lot, about how our personal histories and how we know we live in a punishment culture. I think that's kind of a given. So to what extent do we buy into that for the next generation versus to what extent do we rebel against it and say, we don't need to do this? And that could be a very complicated thing if you're in a relationship with someone who's not actually on the same page as you or close in terms of how to proceed when you don't like what's in front of you. Do you just keep pounding harder, right? And over and over, or do you change route and say there's got to be something going on, like the whole what's the function? The idea that rather than just smashing down the behavior you don't want, take a moment to ask why it's happening. And often that gives you the answer to the problem, right?
I completely agree. Yeah. What's our resistance to a situation at hand? Usually I find if we're finding ourselves in a roadblock with either a client, a dog, or any, like we're in a relationship with everything. And if we're finding resistance in one aspect of our relationship, we could probably look into what's the resistance? What's the resistance I may have to this in order for me to be butting heads in this situation? And how, of course, have I found that myself in this relationship that is perpetuating the same pattern, perpetuating the cycle over and over again. And I don't think
if you walk in and you have a couple in front of you and you feel like they're not quite on the same page about one, what the problem is, and two, what the route forward is, to what extent do you take a side? I mean, how do you handle that in a way that allows you to move forward without somebody getting irritated with you?
This is probably my favorite part of the job, to be honest. Of course, I at first just try to make sure everybody's heard, try to find a solution where everybody can be happy and understood, that I think is still in alignment with the action plan that I think would be the most effective. However, if I keep hitting roadblocks and I'm seeing this isn't about the dog, this isn't about the training plan, we're just hitting resistance because this is something else. I like to try to phrase things to clients that can maybe make them see that although I'm saying this about your dog and I'm not saying this about your relationship, you've probably said the exact same thing somewhere else in your relationship, and kind of help them see that, like, you think this is a dog training problem, but this is like a reoccurrence in your life problem. And it's like almost all the time that this happens that people say, wow, my dog is just like me, or yeah, that's so relatable. And I'm like, yeah, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So, if it's appropriate, we'll go forward and we'll just directly talk about the resistance in the safest way possible without overstepping. Like, I'm not a therapist, but can we talk about things head on? And maybe we can like loosen up the resistance so we can actually make some progress here, because it's not such like a big scary roadblock.
Well,
Does
I
that
think
make sense?
even acknowledging things like punishment culture and talking about what that means and how most of us were raised in, if you don't do it, you're going to get punished. If you do it, well, of course you did it. You were supposed to. So knowing that, most of us I think can relate to that. And if you're in front of somebody who seems to be wanting to stay down that path, I think it's actually a really interesting conversation. But boy, would you got to tread lightly with some folks, because not everyone's going to want to hear that. But I think it's super interesting to think about. I know Jerri and I've talked about, like, we've known people who had really difficult pasts, and it seems like some percentage of people solve their difficult past with a whole lot of therapy, and some people solve their difficult past by suppressing the crap out of it, that word's allowed, and don't
new rule.
They go over, they hold it down themselves. They never deal with it. And it's really interesting to watch the relationship between how people train dogs and how they've handled their own significant trauma, big traumas, big things. And it's like, wow, I kind of do see a relationship here between how people are doing things and where they come out with their dogs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I always like to
I
bring it
see
around
that.
to parenting for people. If
Mm-hmm.
they have kids, I ask them, "What's your parenting style?" And as they start talking, they're like, "Well, we're kind of free flow."
Oh,
Okay, I see what you're saying. I'm like, "Yeah. If your parent, how were you parented? Were your parents real strict?" And they're like, "Yes," and I hated it. I'm like, "Same." And so I swung the
pendulum
opposite
swung.
direction
Yeah.
and have, and this is another thing that Denise and I talk about, and have had a more free flowing style of parenting that has yielded its own set of consequences. So whenever I see, I'm thinking of this one particular example, and this dog actually did great. It was a little dog. He lived in a house with four other dogs, and they had a fairly large, nice home, but they had two adult boys that I noticed were there all the
Mm.
time on the couch, hanging out, doing whatever, I've got one down there, what they do when they're 19, 20 years old and they're wandering around in the world. And then there's these dogs running around everywhere. And so the
Mm-hmm.
first conversation was like, your house is fun. Like it seems like everybody's kind of just going around doing whatever. And I think that that's great for a lot of kids and a lot of um, dogs in a family setting. You could throw a couple Labradors in there, they're going to do great, you know? I don't think your little dog likes that. He's anxious. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He's always he didn't look. It just had that look to him all the time. And it reminded me of the kids I knew needed structure, and their parents were, doing whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
there is definitely a correlation there between how we were parented, how we parent, the dynamic between our spouse or partner in terms of parenting. I know Denise has shared um, that. So, what did you say about your husband that you didn't necessarily like to correct him or go against him in front of your boys, which I think is very, very common. And I think we, obviously should be considering our partner in relationship. And so okay, well, I'll just cut this. We'll go with what this parent thinks. That's also a dynamic. And then there's a parent that has to always be in control.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to control what happens with the kids. They want to control what happens with the dog. They want to control what's happening in the training sessions. They want to, the way
For
that
me,
you
it was
deal.
hard though, because well, I'm not that controlling anymore, but I mean, all dog turtles are controlling. I had to work at not being controlling. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yep.
like, it's true. So
Guilty.
I got over it, time, age, I don't know, whatever. But one of the challenges, my husband was the stay-at-home parent. I was not.
Oh, that's
I was working.
right.
And
That's
so
right.
I just felt that under those circumstances that it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't correct for me to come in, even though I had a lot of opinions. I wanted more structure. Like you eat breakfast, you eat lunch, you eat dinner, you have two snacks, that's it. Not this walk around the house with food in your hand all day. Like it drives me, it still does.
Yeah.
Like kind of that. And that's a I've noticed that as I raised my kids, that's very common. It's like children can't go 3 minutes without eating. It's like, what is
Yeah.
up with that,
Same.
right? Whereas when I grew up, we actually could go 4 or 5 hours without eating because those were
Yeah.
called meals.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We actually ate pretty well because you were hungry. By the time you got home, your parents, not happy if you had a
Mm-hmm.
snack before
Yeah.
dinner. And that has
True.
Oh,
changed.
yeah.
So a little bit I swim upstream from society because I would like more structure. And my husband was raised very, well, he was actually, frankly, he wasn't home most of the time. He was in boarding schools and such. So it was just a whole different existence
Mm-hmm.
and made him much more relaxed than I am. And I have given a lot of thought to issues where we have with our kids in these days, how much that relates. So I wish we'd had more structure, right? I wish, but I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago. A lady had kids my age, and we had a similar issue with one of our kids. And I was saying, I wish I had been more structured. And she said, "Let me tell you something. My kids could not play video games when they came home." She was like running down all these rules, and she goes, "I did the exact opposite of you, and we both have the same issue."
And
Mm-hmm.
look at that. Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? I
Genetics.
tell people that all the time when they are going on and on and on about how their parents ruined their lives and now they do illegal substances and they're in their cups.
Yep.
I'm like, listen, I had the best childhood. I had structure. I had everything that I could have. It was all right there. Boop, 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 boop. And look, here we are in this meeting together. Here we are in this meeting together talking about how we're both homeless. Isn't that funny? No, it's so much more. It's choices.
So much. There's so much that's outside of our control too. Society is huge. By the time your kid goes to school, see, that's one big thing with dogs. You pretty much can always control your dog's existence. They don't leave your house for 8 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And then the neighbor Labrador teaches them how to bark or whatever it is. Like, we have so much more control. And actually, that is something I think about in terms of how we train our dogs. I did not train my children. I raised them. And my interest was turning them into respectable adults who could make good decisions when they weren't being supervised. Like, that was my mental model. But dogs, and I do use a lot of analogies with kids, but this is one place where I have an issue with that, because the reality is your dog will never be an independent player making their own decisions out of the house, ever. And to me, that actually is a pretty significant difference. You're not trying to raise dogs to become independent players. And, you know, it's a permanent dependent, which is a different thing.
We're essentially raising dogs to be the Robin to our Batman. You know, like the society is structured in such a way, and you know, the humans are generally on the top there making the tough decisions. They're there with us, so they always have a steward, and that's it. That's their potential, is the steward they got, which is interesting because it's not that way with children. You could have the crappiest of crap parents. You could be physically, mentally, all the kinds of abuse. You can still, somewhere along the line, have something happen, make some different choices, and end up having a fantastic life and a great life because of the sovereignty and the autonomy that we have. It is interesting that we don't. That's why I get really upset when people say that that their dog is their kid, and then they double down on that is their kid. They don't have kids, but that is their kid. And I'm like, I really think that you should go tell a mother that's lost her child. I really think that you should go find a mother who's lost their child, stand her next to a woman that just lost her dog, and you tell me whose grief is more profound. It is not the same. It's devastating when our dogs pass away. And there are people who their dog is the only thing that they have. And that there is something to be said for that, but it's not the same as losing a child, as rearing a child. You cannot put a child in a little crate. I mean, you can, but you're probably going to go to the penitentiary. You can't put a kid in a crate. You can't, when it doesn't work out, you don't just go down. I mean, how many families, we all know a family, a regular family, that has rehomed a dog, that has gotten a dog, it didn't work out for whatever reason, they took it back, it happens. But we don't hear about when it's not going well with our children. The regular average middle class family takes their kid down to the DCF and surrenders them. That's well said. Different. Yeah, that's different. So while we can treat our dogs lovingly and put them in a position of caring for them and having a meaningful life with them, I do think that it's inappropriate is probably the best word I have for that, to be comparing to having children. It's an obligation that is sometimes soul-wrenching, you know? I mean, sometimes I literally have to take a sigh within my soul that I got to keep these kids alive. Oh, I got to keep these kids alive. Now I got to pay for this one's horse. You know, like you're responsible for so much more. It's their dreams. It's their extracurricular activities. It's, you know, your dog doesn't have a boyfriend that broke up with him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you don't have to console your dog because Lindsay on down the way said that your kid was ugly. You know, you don't have to do those kinds of things. Dogs don't have the interactions with human beings that we have. It's a really interesting conversation. I know it's a sensitive topic.
It's certainly a level of depth that is simply different. And then there's aspects with my dogs, because I have more in common with my dogs than I do with my kids.
How so?
I do.
Yeah, I mean,
I love going
I see
out,
that.
watching my dogs run. I love going out walking and the dogs are running. I love training my dogs to do things, and they love learning things, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
My kids, uh, no.
Yeah, it depends on what the interests. If the interests are different,
Yeah.
I do notice a really big difference on the way that you connect with your children. Like I really do not have a favorite. I
I
don't.
was
You
just
love
gonna
your children
ask.
in totally different ways. Some parents say that they do, but my kids are really far apart and they all have a really profound like if I
Mm,
didn't have Jude, I would have never got sober. That
mm,
something happened out of all the things that ever happened, and it was about him, and it just cracked everything for me. I was like, I can't let
mm,
this little boy not have a mom. Like, this is wrong.
mm,
This is wrong. And so he has that with me. Layla is the kid that fell into what I love. And so by nature of that, we are together all the time. And she's much more like my sister than she is my daughter. And I prefer it to be that way because a mother and a daughter working together, I don't want it to be like that forever. There are days where Layla knows more than I do, and she has to say to
mm.
me, "You're not doing that right," or "You need to go get that over there," and I have to let her have that and
Amazing.
grow that part in her. So I'm mostly just a sister to her
Mm,
that's trying to
mm,
make sure she didn't do any weird stuff, and hyping her up. And then my younger son um, takes after me in personality. The other two are not like me, but he is, and so he's very like there's a beat. If there's a beat, we're stopping. We're dancing. Listen, if there's a camera, we're on it. Like it's just a different. So I've noticed
Awesome.
that you can have completely different connections
Mm,
with your
mm,
children. Jude, a few summers ago, I had a place that had this big barn, and he was like a junior in high school, and it was like the party house. And all these kids every weekend are over here in this barn. I don't know. I don't know. They were safe. That's all I can say. They're playing beer pong. It's not that big of a deal. I went out there one night to check on them, and they were playing a game. And they said, "Who would you, out of your children, who's your best friend? Who would you save? And who would you be on an island with?" And
mm.
all these kids are staring at me, and Jude's there, and I'm like, but the answers are very clear to me.
Yeah.
Best friend would be Jude because he's the easiest to talk to. We have a lot of like we like a lot of the same stuff. Um, Layla would be the person that I'm stuck on the island with because I need to get stuff done. I need to build stuff. We need a fire. We need, we could potentially be fighting. I don't know, but if I need to get something done, that's her. And then I got to save the baby.
Mm,
You got to save the youngest one. There's no, you can't, what
cool.
is that? But it reminds me of how people are with their dogs as well. Whether they have children or not, they treat their dogs totally different.
Hmm.
Totally different. I mean, a lot of dog trainers don't. I think a lot of dog trainers see that could maybe be weird, but I will see dogs and families regularly that are there for consult I'm thinking of one right now, and I had to tell her last night. She's also a client of your academy, Denise, and I had to tell her last night. She's been to 6 trainers. I'm the sixth one. She has 3 greyhounds. She's a wonderful dog parent. Loves these dogs. They're very well taken care of. And I told her last night, I don't think that your dog is reactive.
Mm,
I don't think that there's anything wrong with your dog. I think that your dog doesn't like people and other dogs in his face. And I think he tends to be uh, higher up in the social hierarchy of your dogs. I think he probably is kind of more the boss, and he suffers no fools. And that's his personality. That's not reactivity.
No.
And it
hmm.
was like, I mean, no one has ever said
Nice.
this to her. Is it aggression? Is it reactivity? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And this is a person that's very, very dedicated to her hobbies and sports that she does with the dogs. And it made me sad for
Was
her.
it in her
Mm,
house that she was concerned? The behavior within her house?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's interesting because I think we've talked a little bit. I think a lot of people call dogs reactive that I don't think are reactive at all. I just
Yes.
think they're just dogs who don't want other dogs
Hmm.
right up to them. And if you just stop doing that, redirect them, move on. I don't think that's reactive. To me, reactive is a dog who sees another dog in the distance and is hard to stop and console. Not a
hmm.
dog who's like, I prefer to be left to my own devices. And I'm kind
Right.
of fascinated by how we've broadened the term because we expect so much of dogs in terms of sociability. Whereas I don't think we
Yeah.
did when I was a kid. You just didn't walk down the street and have your dog interacting with other people's dogs. Like
Right.
you just walked your dog and they walked their dog and you crossed the street when somebody else came, you know. So it does seem that our expectations are very high. And then if a dog kind of lifts its lip, we freak out. I actually got myself into a little bit of trouble. I do this pretty often. My latest, a few days ago, my adult dog, Zen, pinned the puppy hard, plopped him down on the ground and went at him. And I stopped and I watched what was happening. The puppy came in with way too much energy. Frankly, I didn't even want the puppy to come in, but I missed a certain door was open, whatever. Anyway, so the puppy ends up and the other dog just pounds into the ground, right? And just holds him down. And I just told myself, just breathe for a sec. And I really looked. And he wasn't hurting the puppy. His teeth were above. It was close. And he held that puppy there for a bit. 10 seconds, I don't know. Felt like forever. Until the puppy absolutely didn't move. And then he was done. He walked away. Now, I have seen this with almost every dog I've brought into my home. So you should have seen it when it was Brito the Terrier, all 10 pounds of him, on top of Zen at 40 pounds and 4 months of age. Took him to the ground and you put on a show, stood on top of him, screamed, and it was terror. It went on for 30 seconds, not 10 seconds. And I just stood there and I let it happen. And I'd actually forgotten about this till a couple days ago. And a certain number of people are just absolutely horrified that I let that happen. But you know, I'm not a dog, and I don't know exactly what the conversation was. But what I do know is that the puppy then did not end up afraid of Zen. He's cautious around him and he is respectful. But that's not a bad thing. A puppy being cautious and respectful around your adult dogs is actually good. So then yesterday I took Brito outside, and for reasons that are not clear to me, Brito has not pinned the puppy. And I don't know if it's because he's getting older. So when Zen came in, maybe that was his last hurrah. At this point, he's not. He has told the puppy, I don't like that. Like he stiffens and he looks at him, but he hasn't just walloped him. And what I noticed is, as I went out to the backyard, the puppy was sort of not just being stupid, like running in circles around him and just being a stupid herding dog, right? And the adult dog did not like that. Brito did not like that. And so I let it go for about 20 seconds and I watched it. And I thought to myself, you know, if Brito doesn't smack him down, I am going to have to supervise this for the rest of this Border Collie's life. Because I can't allow that. I can't allow my puppy to mistreat my adult dog. But he could solve that so fast because the Border Collie is very submissive. But he needs to do it. And he needs to do it hard. He needs to come in like a wrecking ball. That puppy will hit the ground and it won't happen anymore. And so I'm watching it thinking, and this is what you get when you don't allow a certain amount. I'm not talking stupid. I'm not saying letting dogs work out their differences. I don't do that. But I do let my adult dogs discipline my young puppies. And I find that they come in really hard for a week. And then it just gets lighter and lighter. And then it just goes away. If I had that with 2 adult dogs, I would be rethinking things. Because now we're going to have, that could get really bad, really ugly. So it served me well letting dogs be dogs under certain circumstances. And then, of course, you know, the hordes come in with, you're teaching people to let dogs work. You know how that goes. And then I thought, so when I showed a video of that when I brought Zen and Brito. I don't have a video with Zen and the puppy, but I did with Brito. And I just remember how people howled. And then I thought, as usual, it's not like people came back afterwards and said, oh gosh, your dogs have an amazing relationship. Because I don't know too many people who have a 10-pound dog and a 70-pound dog who can be reliably loose together, running and playing. And Zen knows exactly where his feet are and is very respectful of that terrier and is very careful with him. And when Brito says, this is my couch, Zen says, okay. And he moves off. Like, there are areas where that's not true. There are areas where Zen's like, no, this actually matters to me. And Brito gets it. He's like, he backs off on it. But I'm like, man, we so underestimate the value. I'm not talking about crazy dogs that have aggression issues who are going to bite and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a clear-headed dog who is in a calculated fashion setting down some rules. And the way I can tell is how the puppy responds. Somebody says, well, how do you know if the puppy's emotionally scarred? Because 30 seconds later, he's just back to normal. I mean, if he was emotionally scarred, he wouldn't be normal 30 seconds later. And then you get I know a dog who popped a puppy's eye out. Terrible.
Of course.
I also
Of course.
seen that happen, but the dogs were playing.
Terrible things can happen. It's not that I'm not saying, that your dog with aggression, but if you have clear-headed, sensible dogs, I try not to get involved when too much. I mean, obviously I have normal separation. I do all that stuff. But if the puppy comes in with too much energy and is, bashing into the walls, and the adult dog says, we're not doing that in this house, I'm like, yeah, good.
Okay.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
I think it is. I know that's a topic of great debate, and I would never tell anybody else how they should do it. I think people should do what they want. I really do. I think there's 100 different ways. What's your risk tolerance? Some people live, create, and rotate their entire lives because they never get past the worry. They didn't even need create and rotate. They just never integrated. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot live that way. I can't. And I do wonder if you do it for too long, if your integration takes too long, I kind of wonder if you're actually creating your own problem, because I think separation breeds separation. So there's a sensible amount of separation that you have to do. But I wonder if you always need to be raising criteria just a little bit, like lessening it.
I think so.
I don't know. You think so?
To some degree, if when you see signs of readiness, whatever that may look like from either dog, what are safe ways that we can start integrating them to just coexist with some level of structure? If we're not sure that the dogs are going to be making great choices together, even if that means 2 people walking the dogs, one with either one, or if that's not possible, can we have, some form of management in the household where we have one dog behind a gate or both dogs tethered? But I feel like, just like with many things in training, if we stagnate for too long, we start to see maybe problematic behaviors or stuckness there. So with sociability, I mean, not to anthropomorphize too much, but I can see dogs creating some sort of a story of, I'm always away from this guy. This must be for some reason. So yeah, I think it's important to up the criteria when we observe that we think it'll be safe to do so.
And acting like it's normal. So there was another time when, I don't know, Zen ended up in the same room as the puppy, which I didn't want at that time. But instead of really reacting, I'm just like, come on, Zen, you're going over here. Like, it wasn't oh my God, this wasn't supposed to happen. It was just like, all right, come on, you're going over here. And he just came and it was normal. It's so hard, though, not to just stop and start staring. And then I think now is when we start having problems, right? Because it's like, wait, what do we all do? Everybody's still. What does it mean? And I think it's important to have normalness around. But it's so interesting. And then somebody else got my attention. She sent me a private note and she said, what's interesting about fear mongering, those who went into my dog popped a puppy's eye out, that kind of stuff. She said it's almost like fearful people need to attract more fearful people around them to support their choices. And they do that publicly. And she said, I became a more fearful person as a result. And I thought about that, and I absolutely believe that social media has made me a more fearful person, because I'm constantly being bombarded with all the things that could go wrong. And I think it takes a real, not just in dogs, just in life, I think it takes a real effort not to be sucked in by the fear developing aspect of all the bad stories that you hear. Like, you don't hear about
bad
the million
stories are a very small percentage.
Yeah.
They get amplified, and then we perceive that they are the norm. It happens all the time. This live is about to get cut off. So I want to do our smiles so I can do a cover photo.
It's already been an hour.
And Stephanie, if people want to know, I know, right? Like, I could just keep going and going. If people want to know more about you or learn from you, where do they find you?
Kiss My Mutt Training. This Instagram is probably going to be the best spot for it. I'm going to be posting some exciting new things, hopefully in the next month, if I ever get stuff together.
I like it.
So this is probably the best and easiest place to find me.
Very good.
Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you having me on here.
This was fun. Thank you for joining.
Different topics than we have, and I really liked that. You'll have to come back and visit us again sometime.
Anytime, guys.
All right.
Anytime you ask.
Take
Thank
care.
you, guys.
Right.
Bye-bye.
We did it.
Take care.
Bye.